I'm Callista,
And I'm Teresa, and this is Terrifyingly Typical True Crime.
and now that we're getting to the end of summer, thank God, it is officially the Great British Baking Show season, which is back, and we just love it. So we thought we'd do a little quick chat about it.
Yeah, I swear I start looking maybe, and I know it's September because it's been September for how many years, but I keep maybe June, July. Hey, when's it coming out? Have they changed it? Maybe it's going to come out earlier this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know in the UK, it is, of course, the Great British Bake Off, but because here, I think there's some like Pillsbury thing of the same name. So it's Great British Baking Show, which we refer to as GBS.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's been a lot of, like the Pillsbury. I think that was a couple years ago. And let's just say, we'll just put it out there. The contestants on GBBS are like 1,000% better than any of the contestants in the US because you know what? They seem actually to be nice to each other.
I know, they, like, help each other, and, like, I understand that it's not in the contestants' best interest to help each other because you wanna win, but it's just so gross on the American shows when they're kinda catty, and they would never offer to help each other, and the contestants on GBS just are better.
They just are, except the one time. What was the person who was his name John? He had they were doing like an ice cream cake or something, and he had it in the freezer where it needed to be, or they need to utilize the freezer all the time. And she took his out to put hers in, and she didn't put it back in, and she totally ruined it.
Yeah, that was one of the first few seasons, I think. I don't remember his
Yeah.
name, but she completely ruined it.
Yeah. Yeah. So most of the people I'm gonna say, I know there's a couple, maybe we don't want to say them, that we haven't been impressed with, but overall we just really love GBBS. And I will say Prue's okay. She's grown on me, but nothing is Mary Berry.
No, and the first few seasons were the best with Mary Berry, and I think the hosts were Sue and Mel. Not that I don't like Noel and Allison, but and then we don't have access in South Little America to all those beginning seasons with or series with Mary Berry and Mel and Sue.
Right? Yeah, I really liked them. And I liked, what was it? They didn't do a spinoff, but Paul and Mary did was it holiday baking or something? Or one would do, show some kind of, Paul would make a cake and then Mary would comment and then she would make something. What was that? Was that holiday or was that something else?
I think there were two. I think there was
Okay.
Holiday where like Paul made panettone, and then there was also Masterclass.
That's it. That's it. And that was actually in the tent, I think. Wasn't it? Okay, maybe
Yes.
not. Anyway, Prue's grown on me. She's okay. And she's in her early 80s. I want to say she's 82. So go Prue. It just seems like the longer shows are on, and this could be, an example for all kinds of shows. I don't know if they think everybody's like a 12-year-old, kid or whatever, that our attention span is short, but maybe some people like this, but I know you and I, the whole freaking intro thing where they try to do, this time it was Jurassic Park, and it's just freaking lame.
It's so lame. I feel like it ruins the vibe of the show, like the cozy vibe. It's weird and it doesn't go with it. And it's like, really?
It really doesn't go with it, and I'm really kind of irritated that, I mean, I'm sure their paychecks are large, but kind of irritated that I'm irritated that Prue goes along with it. Paul, it seems like Paul's again, we'll use a 12-year-old, sorry, all 12-year-olds, but 12-year-old personality comes out with the stupid little innuendos, and sure, I'll play along. I'll be the whatever, the dinosaur. Wasn't he the dinosaur? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's lame. And I have to say, I was a little concerned. Was Allison, was her first season the last season? Is that right, or was she on there before?
It was either the last or the one before that.
Okay, I really like her. Because I wasn't a huge fan of Matt,
Uh-huh.
and I liked Sandy too, so I'm glad we're back to, you know, somebody that I like. I like Allison. She seems to actually I don't know, she seems to be concerned about the contestants, give them a hug, that kind of thing. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I think Noel can at times be a bit much. And so I yeah, Allison seems concerned. She seems to really comfort them, like when they're upset, as I would be if something wasn't going well. And so I appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. And I do want to say, though, I'm impressed that Noel has went with a look, kind of like the rocker 70s vibe, whatever he's going for with the loud shirts and stuff. And he has done that for a number of years. So I like that, his attire, his personality hasn't really changed. I appreciate that.
I do appreciate the commitment.
And then also, I think, I don't know if you think this, that the challenges are harder right off the bat.
Yeah, I
I
also think they're weirder because they're searching for more ideas.
Maybe. And of course, there's always biscuit week, cake week, but really having cake week as the first week and then doing like the whole 3D, I just don't think that's necessary. But again, maybe they feel like they'd be, stale or something if they didn't continually tweak with stuff, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I do think maybe they were a bit easier because I feel like they veered more traditional in the beginning, which I appreciated.
Yeah, yeah, and I like because we're not in the UK, I like seeing I like them doing the traditional things, some things I've heard of, some things I haven't, but I really appreciate that.
Yeah, the plastic Victoria sponge or something.
Yeah, and yes, just all of it, really all of it. The UK is better.
This is true. Okay, so let's get on to the episode. We're back with part 2 of our theme on female killer nurses. If you want a summary on a nurse's possible motives for killing a patient, typical patterns in healthcare serial killers, and common traits, you can check out our 14th episode on Elizabeth Wetlaufer. But more so than to Elizabeth's, today's case harkens back to that of Jane Toppin. We've got name changes, lots of lies, and murder over money. To unravel the story of the nurse of many names, we'll start with the one she came into the world with, Jeanine Hannah.
Jeanine Hannah was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1948. A self described mixologist, she spent her childhood combining perfumes and oils, longing to make her own mark on the world. She wouldn't truly come into her own, though, until her long term relationship had run its course. Having married T.J. Wainwright in 1976, Jeanine had 2 children with him in 1982 and 1983. But around the time that their second child was born in 1983, the marriage fell apart. To escape her allegedly abusive ex husband in 1990, Jeanine moved to Oregon and legally changed her name to Jeannie Marie Miata. According to Jeannie, TJ struggled with substance abuse disorder and had previously shot and stabbed her. A bad dude through and through, his gambling disorder translated to a lack of interest in supporting their children and a desperate desire to track Jeanine down to ask for money. So Jeanine didn't stop at getting herself a new name. She went so far as to change her social security number, to give herself a completely new identity, and prevent TJ's friends from running a credit check to find her address. Having managed to flee her ex husband and his associates, Jeanine was now the sole breadwinner for her family of 3. She needed a steady salary, and she was willing to do the work to get it, at least at the start.
Inspired by her grandmother's time as a licensed practical nurse, Jeannie pursued a career in nursing in Oregon. She studied at Portland Community College, Portland State University, Mount Hood Community College, and Clark College. Jeannie went from working as a nursing assistant in 1987 to serving as a certified nursing assistant to acting as a certified medical aide. Finally, after getting her LPN or licensed practical nurse license in 1991, she graduated and became licensed as a registered nurse. One of Jeannie's first jobs was at a neonatal intensive care unit. Caring for high-risk babies would likely be a challenge for anyone. It isn't exactly a stress-free role, but the death of one baby hit Jeannie particularly hard. While she was working at the Oregon Health Science Center in 1991, one specific baby really reminded Jeannie of one of her grandchildren. Tragically, like many of the babies at the center, this young child died. After this loss, Jeannie chose to transition to caring for the elderly instead.
Seems like you are changing one hard situation for another, though at least the elderly patients have lived a life, unlike babies who die.
It's a good point. Any death is tragic, but at least none of the older patients were likely to remind her of young family members. Her devastation might have been the main reason for striking out on a new path, but Jeannie was also motivated by more practical reasons. She could hardly ignore the fact that nursing homes paid far more than hospitals.
That really surprises me.
Yeah, me too, but I assume that isn't the case in every situation. It just wasn't Jeannie's. Higher pay was a necessity because she was helping her daughter and her family financially for a time and supporting her son and his family after he suffered a work related injury. Due to her daughter and grandchildren, then her son living with her at different periods, Jeannie decided to look for jobs in nursing agencies.
For 14 years, Jeannie held various positions in Hillsborough, Oregon City, Gresham, Beaverton, and Portland, but that career eventually came to serve as a cover for her life of crime. She went from losing her job because of verbally abusing patients and lying on her timesheets to committing criminal offenses. While working at Holiday Park Plaza, an assisted living facility in Portland in 2000, Jeannie was suspected of having stolen a credit card from one of the patients to rack up $4,000 worth of charges. Two more residents had pieces of jewelry mysteriously disappear while Jeannie was around. One 96-year-old woman searched and searched for a diamond ring that never turned up, and a different resident discovered that over $20,000 worth of jewelry was nowhere to be found. Unable to ignore multiple thefts, the residential care center launched an investigation that uncovered that charge nurse, Jeannie, had a key to every single one of the patient's rooms. After she was fired, Jeannie refused to claim responsibility for these thefts and chose to blame, wait for it, her daughter instead. So, helping her financially is one thing, but throwing her under the bus to save yourself is also okay.
And we have to take her word that she was actually helping her daughter because, as we'll see, Jeannie has a long term habit of lying to make herself look better.
Yeah, good point. Seems like one of those, if her mouth is moving, she's lying type of people.
Oh, definitely. Jeannie's narrative was that her daughter would bring her checks from the nursing agency to sign because she didn't have time to pick up these checks and deposit them herself. It was during one of these visits that her daughter showed up with some friends. According to Jeannie, this group went into the unlocked rooms of the residents to steal from them, which the blameless nurse had no idea about at the time. The only thing she was guilty of was allowing her daughter into the facility at all
I mean, she's really painting a picture.
and making sure it captures her in the best light.
Well, of course.
Although Jeannie was indicted on 9 counts of forgery, burglary, and theft by a Multnomah County grand jury, Mother of the Year that she said that she took the fall for her daughter after she pleaded with her not to fight the charges. On May 8th, 2001, her hearing was held in the Circuit Court of the State of Oregon for Multnomah County. According to Jeannie, the judge had told her that if she took this to trial and she or her daughter were found guilty, he would double the length of the sentence. So, after Jeannie entered a no contest plea, she was instructed to give back the $27,000 to those she had stolen from and given 5 years of probation. Adding on to the lie that her daughter was the true thief, Jeannie said it was actually $18,000 and her daughter was ordered to pay it back.
Contrary to her claim of innocence, it seemed that the only one facing repercussions was the nurse who had worked at the facility. The hearing ended in her conviction of theft in the first degree and a restriction that prohibited Jeannie from caring for elderly patients. Jeannie's license was revoked, and beyond not being able to work as a nurse in Oregon, the agreement she made stipulated that she was no longer allowed to work as a nurse anywhere. Rather than follow these orders, Jeannie decided it was time for a change of scenery and another change in identity. Having escaped to Texas from Oregon, she worked as a registered nurse at Mission Hospital between June and September 2001, using the name of Julie Kocian, the name of the license she had stolen from a friend, which Jeannie supposedly took so that her ex-husband wouldn't find her.
Upon leaving Mission Hospital in September 2001, Jeanine applied for a Texas nursing license under her maiden name, Jeanine Marie Hannah, and started working with Kelly Healthcare. This new role soon afforded her the position of caretaker to a retired teacher named Margaret Bradley. At the beginning of 2002, 68-year-old Margaret was living in McAllen, Texas with her daughter, Rhonda, her daughter's common law husband, Michael Niger, and the couple's daughter. In case you were also curious, a common law marriage is one in which the couple have not bought a marriage license or participated in an official ceremony. Anyhow, Margaret had multiple sclerosis, partial paralysis, and relied on a wheelchair. So her daughter Rhonda reached out to Kelly Healthcare for some help. In February 2002, the organization appointed registered nurse, 54-year-old Jeanine Hannah, to serve in that trusted position. The arrangement started well enough. Jeanine would come to the Bradley home once every morning and every afternoon to help Margaret with daily activities like getting up, eating, and bathing. The morning visits were paid for by Medicare, and the Bradleys covered the afternoon visits themselves by writing checks to Jeanine.
While Margaret relied on Jeanine for assistance with some activities, one thing she could do on her own was take her medication. The various medications she needed were located within easy reach in a bag attached to the handle of Margaret's scooter. Although none of her prescriptions needed to be injected, Margaret did have periodic injections of vitamin B12, which her nurse gave to her, the large syringes for which were kept below a bathroom sink. In her role as caretaker, Jeanine was, as you'd expect, left alone with Margaret while her daughter and son in law went to work. Normally, when Rhonda and Michael returned home, no surprises awaited them. But on one day in late May, Margaret's drastic change in condition led to the discovery of a series of crimes no one had seen coming.
When Michael, Rhonda's husband, got home from work around 5:40 in the afternoon on May 29th, 2002, he found Margaret clammy and confused. She was mumbling and having trouble grabbing onto a cup, something she normally wouldn't have had any issue with. Saying something was very wrong, he called Rhonda, who was also a registered nurse at McAllen Heart Hospital. During the break she took a little over 2 hours earlier, Rhonda had spoken with her mother on the phone at 3:35. Completely unaware that anything was amiss, she had even talked to Jeanine right after ending the conversation with Margaret. Having left work at 3:23 to buy something at the J.C. Penney at La Plaza Mall and clocking back on at 4:20, she was stunned to receive Michael's concerning call about her mother at 5:43. Rhonda raced home and watched over Margaret for nearly 40 minutes. As time went by, she became more and more worried about her mother's worsening condition and called for an ambulance at 6:26, around 45 minutes after Michael had found her. After the emergency responders arrived, they performed blood tests that showed that the lethargic Margaret had abnormally low blood sugar.
Once she was transported to the hospital, her blood sugar levels rose and fell over the next 24 hours. The doctors were left scratching their heads as to why this non diabetic patient, who never took insulin, was experiencing such large fluctuations in her blood sugar levels. With medical professionals unable to pinpoint the problem, Margaret died the next evening. Following her passing on May 30th, 2002, doctors determined it to be a result of natural causes in the form of secondary adrenal insufficiency, a symptom of which is low blood sugar. Reeling and heartbroken in the days and weeks after her mother's death, Rhonda knew she needed to visit the two banks her mother had used to see how much she had left in her accounts to go towards the funeral expenses. But at both Wells Fargo and Texas State Bank, Rhonda was perplexed by her mother's accounts. The meticulous ledger in Margaret's checkbook said one thing, but the bank's records said something else entirely. Not about to just let these discrepancies go, Rhonda decided to look closer and notice some odd transactions made recently in both accounts.
There were three checks that stood out in particular: number 5038, number 5051, and number 5029. Margaret's ledger noted that check number 5038 had been written to pay for $566 worth of groceries. But the bank's records showed that the check had gone to AIG Insurance. The amount had been used for an auto insurance policy for William and Aloha Shule. These two strangers lived in Mission, Texas. However, there was another covered driver on this policy, one Jeanine Hannah.
I was thinking Janine was evil, but not stupid until this.
Just wait, it gets worse. The second check, number 5051, had been discarded via Margaret's paper shredder. Hot on the trail of her mother's caretaker, Rhonda taped the pieces back together. It turned out to be a voided check for $160 made out to Jeanine. Margaret's signature had been stamped onto it, and of the two signature stamps that Margaret stored in her medicine bag, one just so happened to be missing. Rhonda would later find out that this check had been voided when Jeanine attempted to exchange it for cash. When Jeanine had gone through the drive-thru of Coastal Bank to cash this check around the time of Margaret's death in May 2002, the teller, Yadira Reyna, and her supervisor, Sandra Vecchio, saw what appeared to be an altered check from Margaret's Wells Fargo account. It looked like the original amount on the check had been $60. But then a 1 had been written in a different color ink to change the amount to 160. Following her supervisor's order, Yadira voided this badly altered check. Jeanine proceeded to throw a tantrum and claim that it was Margaret who had changed the amount.
I mean, good on Yadira and Sandra. Also, making a scene is really never going to get you what you want, just like a toddler.
I know I've seen more than one parent give in to their toddler's tantrum, but I hear what you're saying. It doesn't usually work.
I mean, that's true, which people, it's always a mistake. Do not give in to them. They're going to have you wrapped around their finger in not a good way. And maybe I should have said drawing attention to yourself as an adult in a situation where you are in the wrong isn't the best plan.
This is true.
The last check, number 5029, had been noted in Margaret's ledger as being designated for her other daughter, Paula Tubate, to whom she often sent checks ranging from $50 to $100. Even though Margaret had told Paula that she would soon be sending her another of these checks, it had failed to arrive with the rest of her mail. Rhonda learned that check 5029 hadn't been the usual payment to her sister. Instead, Jeanine had cashed it for $1,300 after writing her name over Paula's. Paula could believe that her mother would send her $300, but she couldn't imagine ever receiving a $1,300 check. This significant check, as well as two others, one for $412.82 from an annuity from Allstate Insurance, and one for $21.59, a refund from Southwestern Bell, all found their way into Janine's bank account. Weird. She deposited them on May 31st, 2002, only 24 hours after her employer, whom Jeanine had been the last person to see in good health, had died. I mean, she's rather brazen.
And not nearly as smart as she thinks she is.
Thankfully.
Yes.
Anita Munoz, a teller at Texas State Bank, knew Hannah was a regular customer, but she also knew that the $1,300 check she turned up with on May 31st had been altered. Perhaps in addition to the two names, the one was once again in a different color ink. I mean, what? Did she pull out her purple pen when the original check was written in black? I mean, that's just lazy.
Oh, the black pen ran out, and Margaret didn't have another one, so she just went ahead and used a purple one, but she was the one to change it, I swear.
I mean, would you not, if it was legit, obviously, void the check, write the correct amount with the right name? I can't even imagine a bank cashing something with a name crossed out in addition to the one. I mean, it's just too many things.
You would sure hope they wouldn't cash it, but I guess you never know.
True. I mean, she's not good at this lying thing. Seeing these glaring red flags, Anita didn't want to cash it. Jeanine, though, told her to just charge her account if any issue came up after it was deposited. So Anita did what she was told. When her supervisors later found out about this troubling episode, Anita was very nearly dismissed, proving that the customer is not always right.
I would go as far as to say that they're wrong at least half the time. People think they can get away with anything.
Oh, that is definitely true.
Having looked at each of these odd checks, Rhonda turned her attention to the remaining balance in her mother's account. She saw that Margaret's Texas State bank account had $200 left in it, after 6 ATM withdrawals, each of which was between $200 to $300. None of these withdrawals made any sense. Her mother couldn't even get to an ATM. On top of that, Margaret usually only used around $50 in cash a month to play bingo. With all of these suspicious transactions swirling around in her mind, Rhonda recalled her mother's words from about a month before she died, when she told her that Jeanine needed to stop asking so many financial questions and offering to write checks for her. Still, at this point, all Rhonda had were theories. What she needed was evidence. So she used the connections she had made as a registered nurse at McAllen Heart Hospital to launch her own investigation.
I'm really impressed with Rhonda.
As we all should be, everyone needs a Rhonda in their life.
Yeah.
Once Margaret's lab results were finally available after her cremation, Dr. Louis Padula agreed to look over the results from her C peptide test, which shows the amount of naturally produced insulin a body should have. The test from Margaret's hospital stay revealed an excessive amount of insulin in her body when she died. It also excluded the possibilities that Margaret may have had endogenous hyperinsulinism or pancreatic cancer, either of which could have naturally caused Margaret's body to produce too much insulin. Even though Dr. Padula was unable to state the type or amount of insulin that had been given to Margaret, he could definitely say that such a large amount wouldn't even be given to a diabetic patient.
Endocrinologist Dr. Mercy Buyout Moore reiterated Dr. Padula's findings. She had analyzed Margaret's insulin levels prior to her death and noticed that her insulin reading of 400 was astronomically higher than a typical reading of around 27. This reading was a result of the size of the B12 syringes we mentioned earlier, which were big enough to hold around 3 times the normal insulin dosage for a diabetic patient. Now that it had been revealed that Margaret's death was not all that it appeared, the attending doctors had her death certificate changed to state her cause of death as an exogenous insulin overdose, making her manner of death a homicide. Although Rhonda filled the police in about the discoveries on June 6th, by that point, Margaret had already been cremated. As for her murderer, in the wake of Margaret's death, Jeanine worked as a registered nurse at 2 more Texas hospitals from June 2002 through July 2002 until the Texas Board of Nursing temporarily suspended her professional nursing license on July 22nd. The Board of Nurse Examiners for the state of Texas went on to revoke her license on November 12, 2002. But Jeanine wouldn't be absconding to a new state again. After a Texas police investigation that lasted nearly 2 years, Jeanine finally had to face up to her thefts. As she had the last time she got caught robbing her patients, Jeanine pleaded no contest to the charges of having stolen almost $4,600 from Margaret Bradley. And it was in the lead up to a related court appearance that Jeanine was arrested and indicted for knowingly and intentionally causing death and serious bodily injury to Margaret in October 2004, 2.5 years after killing her.
Jeanine's trial began on May 16th, 2005, and to say it was eventful would be an understatement. The many jobs Jeanine had held under various aliases, including Jeanine Hannah, Jeannie Miata, and Julie Kocian, before working for Kelly Healthcare at McAllen, were all listed. Yet the bombshell in Jeanine's past was hidden in her time in Oregon. During the trial in Edinburgh, Texas, some of the nearly 20 total witnesses came forward to shed light on another murder Jeanine had seemingly gotten away with for years. One such witness, named Troya Brown, testified that she had worked with Jeanine Hannah, or as she was known at the time, Jeannie Miata, at Beaverton Rehab and Specialty Care until Jeannie's escape in 2001. When Troya came into the long-term care center in Beaverton, Oregon at 6:30 in the morning on September 10th, 2000, Jeannie was finishing her night shift. She told Troya to not, under any circumstances, go into 78-year-old Ann Jones's room to look in on her because she had had a rough night. Troy was having none of her colleagues' weird ass order and went to check on her patient.
And if somebody's having a rough night, wouldn't that be the time to look in on them? I
You would sure
mean,
think so.
Troya did what we would hope most people would.
For real. Don't tell me how to do my job. When Troya headed for Anne's room, though, Jeannie, whose shift was now over, followed Troya and began bizarrely asking her to double check the amount of insulin she had given Anne, a request she didn't make regarding any other patient.
I mean, that doesn't seem sus.
Not at all.
It soon became clear why Jeanine hadn't wanted anyone to see Anne and how she had given herself away in putting a spotlight on the insulin she had given her. When the nursing director of the rehabilitation facility, Janice Nesbitta, came into work at 9 that morning, she discovered Anne unconscious with a blood sugar level of only 13. The reading should have been 70 or higher, and only 2 hours before, Anne's had been at 100. Given this drastically low blood sugar level, Anne died only hours later. Although a do not resuscitate form in Anne's room seemed to have been signed by the then comatose patient, forensic document examination expert James Green determined that it looked almost nothing like the now deceased's other signatures. Using a system that assesses the probability of forgery and samples of Janine's handwriting for comparison, he gave the possibility that Jeanine had been the one to forge her patient's signature, a 7 out of 9 on a scale on which 9 was the highest likelihood. Ready with another lie, Jeanine said Anne had agreed to her signing it. Yeah, right.
Because that seems legit.
And scary AF.
Yeah. Not buying that in the slightest, Marjorie Wooliver, Anne's daughter, remembered that her mother's diamond ring had briefly gone missing after her death. It seemed unlikely that it could have fallen off Anne's finger due to how swollen they had become in her poor condition. After nursing director Janice said she would look into the disappearance, 2 days later, the ring mysteriously showed up in an anonymous envelope in her office mailbox. Since it appeared before anyone alerted the police, no charges were ever filed. While she may have let this go at the time, when Marjorie heard about Margaret's death and Janine's arrest on the news, she began to believe that Anne's death at Beaverton Rehab and Specialty Care wasn't a result of her diabetes. So she went to a lawyer with her concerns. Anne had arrived at the rehabilitation center for a week-long stay after hip surgery, with her doctor's words about Anne soon making a full recovery ringing in their ears. Her loved ones were sure that Jeanine had given Anne an overdose of insulin.
After Jeanine fled Beaverton Rehab and Specialty Care in Oregon and started working at Mission Hospital in Texas in 2001 as Julie Kocian, the director of the hospital, Manira Ruiz, saw firsthand their new registered nurse's familiarity with administering insulin. Because Julie was assigned to a ward on which more than 70% of the patients required routine insulin injections, she, like all the other nurses, had a key to the locked refrigerator in which Mission Hospital stored its insulin. There was no system in place to track insulin usage.
Which seems highly problematic.
Yeah, we should track all medication.
Right?
Yeah. So there was no way of knowing if some of it suddenly disappeared. And Nurse Julie would have been well aware that the medication had a long shelf life and could still work as intended months later. When Julie left her position at Mission Hospital because of a work-related injury in September 2001, it's more than possible that she walked out of the door with more than her last paycheck. And perhaps she found a use for that unnoticed missing insulin at her next job with Kelly Health while working with a woman named Margaret Bradley.
To argue that Jeanine didn't kill Margaret with an insulin overdose, her defense attorney, Roy Garza, took a two-pronged approach. In addition to sowing seeds of doubt over whether she really had died from a lethal dose of insulin, another suspect was introduced, Margaret's daughter, Nurse Rhonda. The defense went after Rhonda for having once taken some easily accessible insulin home from work. Rhonda had admitted to Detective Ralph Ramirez that on June 30th, 2002, a month after Margaret's death, she had accidentally brought insulin home after giving a dose to a patient, placing the rest of the medication in her pocket, then simply forgetting to check that her pockets were empty before leaving. But rather than using this mistakenly stolen insulin to murder someone, Rhonda took it back to the hospital and threw it away because it had been unrefrigerated for such a long period of time.
I believe Rhonda. Seems like her actions speak for themselves.
I think so.
Having established the means, Roy Garza highlighted her opportunity in asking Rhonda why she provided time records from her workplace, McAllen Heart Hospital, and a J.C. Penney timestamp receipt from the day her mother died. Rhonda said she thought it was in her best interest to give an alibi after being questioned by a detective on her mother's case. An alibi, by the way, that was pretty freaking solid, since the only time Rhonda wasn't at work was when she went to JCPenney, a store which was in southern McAllen, whereas her home is in the northeast part of the city. While it wasn't impossible that Rhonda could have managed to murder her mother in this short time span, these pieces of evidence made it unlikely. Since pointing the finger at everyone close to the victim who provided an alibi wasn't a surefire way to get his client off the hook, as we all know, alibis serve to rule people out as much as they serve to rule them in. Roy Garza served up Rhonda's motive by bringing up her gambling disorder, her mother's history of helping her with her debt, and the $10,000 Margaret had put on a credit card to pay for Rhonda's car.
Having pointed the finger at Rhonda, Roy Garza turned his attention to claiming that the allegation that Jeanine had murdered Anne with an insulin overdose, then stolen her diamond ring, was simply an attempt to smear his client's name. Prosecutor William McPherson had an easier time of showing Jeanine's ill intent, considering the court order she was violating and caring for Margaret Bradley, and her use of various aliases to hide her identity. The week long trial came to a close after 3 hours of deliberation. Although Jeanine had been persuaded not to testify, her furious facial expressions clearly displayed her contempt for the outrageous claims being made against her. But despite her attempt to act as the unfairly accused, on May 25th, 2005, 55-year-old Jeanine Hannah was found guilty of murdering Margaret Bradley with insulin so she could take almost $4,600 from her accounts. She was convicted of 1 count of murder and 1 count of injury to an elderly person over the age of 65. As prosecutor William McPherson put it, justice was done. This lady is a real bad person.
2 days later, after only 35 minutes, the 12-person jury sentenced Jeanine to 99 years in prison. While she was being taken from the courtroom, Jeanine maintained her innocence, and her attorneys made sure to mention their plan to file a notice of appeal the very next week. Following the testimony concerning Anne's death, an investigation was launched by the Beaverton police the next month. Even though authorities only ramped up their efforts 5 years after Jeannie Miata was Anne's nurse at Beaverton Rehab and Specialty Care back in the beginning of 2003. The lawyer for the organization that operated the facility, Avamere Health Services, Lawrence Lopardo, reached out to the Beaverton police to voice his suspicions after a wrongful death lawsuit was filed. Whether that was followed up on at the time or not, in 2005, the Beaverton police decided to expand their investigation to other care centers at which Jeannie may have killed other patients. Ultimately, though, Margaret's murder was all Jeanine was ever charged with and convicted of, in spite of the circumstances surrounding Anne Jones' death. The wrongful death lawsuit Marjorie Wooliver, Anne's daughter, brought against Beaverton Rehab and Specialty Care and Avamere Health Services came to an end with a settlement of $2.1 million.
As for the woman who brought about a pain that no amount of money can dull, Jeanine did go on to appeal, but her conviction was upheld by the 13th Court of Appeals in August 2008. Now incarcerated at the William P. Hobby Unit in Marlin, Texas, Jeanine has continued to maintain her innocence in interviews. When questioned, she claims to be a caring nurse who became close friends with Margaret Bradley. Her version of the events that led up to Margaret's death was that her patient had had a urinary tract infection, but other than that, she was perfectly fine when Jeanine left her for the last time. Jeanine said Margaret had been arguing with Rhonda constantly, and that when Rhonda didn't immediately come home in the afternoon on May 29, 2002, Jeanine was the one to try and convince Rhonda's husband Michael to call for an ambulance.
really working to make herself appear as the innocent, caring caregiver.
Always. Jeanine further portrayed Rhonda as the villain in recounting how once Margaret was at the hospital, Rhonda had the evening nurse give Margaret morphine to stop her breathing, all because Margaret supposedly didn't want to die in a nursing home like her own mother had. According to Jeanine, that was only the story Rhonda tried to sell because in reality, she simply wanted to no longer be responsible for her mother. And because Rhonda worked at the hospital, she somehow made the records of this morphine drip disappear. Jean herself apparently saw this fatal IV bag when she showed up right before Margaret died.
Unlike Rhonda, Janine claimed that she had no reason to steal and thus murder Margaret, who was an incredibly generous person. Margaret had willingly lent Janine $400 for the back taxes on her property, and the altered checks were simply Janine's way of reimbursing herself for holiday tickets for a trip Margaret was supposed to take with her because her evil daughter, Rhonda, wouldn't bring her along on her own travels. Margaret didn't have any checks with her, so she was completely on board with her friend changing the old ones. Janine only pleaded no contest to the theft to avoid being unfairly prosecuted by the bank. Shockingly, Janine has never displayed any remorse for her crimes. Her only regrets are her unlucky lot in life and her choice of career. She has repeatedly asked for the length of her sentence to be reduced or for it to be commuted. After almost 2 decades in prison, her goal is to get her case into federal court, which fortunately doesn't seem likely.
Thank God.
Agreed.
And I can't speak to Janine's luck. If her husband truly was abusive and she was forced to flee, I of course sympathize. But that doesn't excuse her callousness or greed. She simply decided that she was entitled to more than her paycheck. Janine's top priority was looking out for herself. And whoever she had to blame, whoever she had to murder, to her, it was all justified. We're taking next week off, but we'll be continuing our series on female killer nurses when we discuss the case of Kristen Gilbert the week after.
All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case or theme for us to discuss, feel free to email us at terrifyinglytypicalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at Terrifyingly Typical Podcast on Instagram and at Terrifyingly Typical Pod on TikTok. Leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of the case. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you soon.